We are actually inside the largest financial experiment humanity has ever seen right now, but most of us are not even aware of it. Globally, debt has reached unimaginable levels. Countries are borrowing trillions. Central banks are printing money at the push of a button, and people are taking on 30 to 35-year loans as if it's completely normal. And we still see borrowing as something ordinary and harmless. But the truth is, if only it were that simple. Debt has always been a tool of power throughout human history. Sometimes it has been used to control, and sometimes it has exploded like a bomb that destroys entire systems. The real issue is this: will this massive debt become a problem one day? No, it already will. The real question is when, and who will pay the price. To understand this better, we need to go back, way back, to Mesopotamia. The first written records were not poems, but debt lists. Who owed what to whom? Everything was recorded. Back then, debt wasn't just economic. It was almost sacred. Sometimes kings would even cancel all debts entirely so that society wouldn't collapse. So ancient people knew this. Debt is fine, but too much of it is dangerous. Later, debt changed form. With gold, credit, and banks, things expanded. Kings borrowed to finance wars, empires were built, but the same risk always existed. For example, Spain went bankrupt multiple times due to debt, even when it was one of the richest countries in the world. So no matter how powerful or wealthy you are, uncontrolled debt can bring you down. In the modern era, things grew even bigger, especially in the 20th century. After wars, countries became so indebted that repayment was nearly impossible. Germany's hyperinflation is one of the most striking examples. Then, in 1971, a major turning point occurred. Money was no longer tied to gold. In other words, the system no longer had a real limit. Governments became able to borrow as much as they wanted. This is where the real turning point began. After that, every crisis was solved with more debt. When the economy slowed down, debt was given. When a crisis hit, even more debt was issued. It kept piling up, debt upon debt. The 2008 crisis is one of the best examples. People often call it a housing crisis, but in reality, it was debt inflated by more debt. The system evolved to such a fragile point that even a small crack shook everything. Banks were rescued, but the same cannot be said for ordinary people. Many lost their jobs and their homes. So the system does not treat everyone equally. Today, global debt has reached mind-blowing levels. We are talking about hundreds of trillions of dollars, far beyond the size of the world economy itself. And the most critical point is this: this debt absolutely has a cost. Debt is not just a number. It changes behavior, creates bubbles, and essentially mortgages the future. Every loan taken today is like selling tomorrow's labor in advance. And history tells us this: debt always ends one way or another. Either it is paid, or it is eroded by inflation, or it is not paid at all. There is no other option. Today, most of us don't directly feel the effects of debt because the system hides it from us. The government borrows, but it doesn't come directly to you. You use a credit card and borrow without even realizing it. Everything feels normal, doesn't it? But in reality, the system is entirely built on debt. And this system has one defining characteristic: it feels very comfortable while rising, but crushes you when it falls. Right now, many countries are borrowing just to pay the interest on their existing debt. This is not sustainable. Yet despite this, people are still encouraged to borrow. Study, take a loan, buy a house, go into debt, spend now. think later. It's presented as if debt is endless and risk-free. But history shows the opposite. So what happens next? There are usually three paths: inflation, eroding debt by devaluing money, restructuring, or outright default. The most likely scenario is inflation. In other words, the value of your money slowly decreases without you even noticing. And here is a critical point. This is not just about economics, it's about power. When crises happen, big players are usually rescued, but ordinary people pay the price. That's why understanding this matters. Because if you don't, you can get lost inside the system. So what can you do? There's no need to panic, but it's important to know this. Debt is not innocent. History always repeats itself. You need to learn how to protect yourself. In other words, be more conscious, move toward things with real value, and don't believe everything you're told. Because the cycle is always the same. Debt rises, it is ignored, a crisis occurs, the system resets. And if we don't learn from it, it will end the same way it always has in the past.